right. I'm Kenya Williams. I'm the founder and principal of Hush Soundscape Planning and Design here in Portland, Oregon. It's the first urban planning and design firm to specialize in soundscape planning and design. I'm also a researcher and scholar in urban planning, acoustic ecology, and sensory urbanism. Today, I'm going to share with you some of my research titled The Soniferous Experience of Public Space, a Soundscape Approach. This topic is dear to me. I've been passionate about sound and listening for a little over 30 years as a filmmaker, a sound designer, sound artist, and music producer. Long before I was an urban planner and designer. In urban planning school and my first urban planning jobs, I was pretty obvious the oddball urban planner. I was always talking about the soundscape and listening and, trying to recruit people to go on sound walks. And often, most of my colleagues, they really didn't have a true understanding of what I was talking about. And, it was somewhat frustrating, so I looked further into how sound, could be incorporated into urban planning, and I landed, in the same places. Most of the content that I was finding, most of the practitioners I was engaging with, they really centered around noise codes, regulations, and enforcement. So I kept digging deeper into sound, also sense of place. And then I got involved in the global acoustic ecology community. I started reading more. I started attending conferences and reaching out to soundscape scholars and professionals. And I quickly learned that practitioners in other countries were thinking more holistically about place, sound, atmosphere, ambience, and the sensory experiences of cities. So that's when it became more apparent to me that soundscapes and acoustic ecology approaches were not being incorporated into the practice or much into the education here in the United States. And there was no awareness or value in regard to sound. Everybody focused on noise and getting rid of sound. So I started thinking more about sound and the senses. And as an urban designer and planner, I was thinking, how can I really recommend and plan designs and create urban design plans without thinking about the complete sensory experience? So let's fast forward. As I started thinking about my own research and what could I do, I also started thinking about my lived experience as a practitioner, and a few things started to come to mind. I started thinking about my former colleagues and other practitioners that I encountered. I pondered, how can I increase their awareness about soundscape and the soniferous experience of urban spaces and parks? Also contemplated, how do I fill that knowledge gap that I encountered about soundscapes and the benefits so that planners and other practitioners could consider this for their practice? So I arrived at a place to do serious research about sound, urban planning in cities. And here in Portland, we have a waterfront park. It's called Tom McCall Waterfront Park. And I selected this as a research site. And, I designed and conducted my research. And the following three research questions guided my study. First research question was, what are the soniferous experiences for practitioners who do a sound walk of Tom McCall Waterfront Park? My second research question was, how do practitioners who do a sound walk of the park understand the soniferous experience of Tom McCall Waterfront Park? And my last research question was, how does the soniferous experience of practitioners who do a sound walk of the park inform future planning and design considerations of Tom McCall Waterfront Park? So, this study used a qualitative method because of my interest in understanding the practitioners' lived experiences of doing a sound walk in the park and their lived experience with the phenomena of sound in a park. I use a hermeneutic phenomenological approach because I viewed the practitioners in this study as individuals in, continual interaction with the park, considering it as a lived space of life, where it was possible for them to experience many types of sounds. This approach also took into account how the participants interpreted or understood the soundscape of the park rather than simply describing it. Unfortunately, hermeneutic phenomenology is associated with Martin Heidegger, who was a supporter of the Nazi Party. Although I mentioned Heidegger in my research, I do not cite him, but refer to him as others have cited him in regard to studying phenomenology as a method. So the instruments that I used, as far as for my methods, for my data collection, I used a soundwalk, I used a soundwalk survey, I also did a post-soundwalk survey. During the soundwalk, the participants, they navigated through the parks via instructions on their mobile devices while answering questions that corresponded to each quadrant in the park. Additionally, soundwalk participants had the opportunity to provide open-ended comments on the survey form at any time during their soundwalk. After the participants completed the soundwalk, they received an automatic email link that pointed them to answer questions in a post-soundwalk survey. Before finalizing the methodology that I used, I conducted 4 pilot studies with the help of 181 participants. So I'll talk a little bit about the site. Tomahawk Waterfront Park, that was my study area. It's a 36-acre park. It was once the site of Harbor Drive Freeway. In 1968, a proposed expansion of the freeway was met with opposition from community activists. The freeway expansion was halted by then Governor Tom McCall, who formed a task force to study the freeway's removal. In 1972, a citizen advisory committee was established to make recommendations for the area to be redeveloped, including a waterfront park. The removal of Harbor Drive Freeway started in 1974, and the park was completed in 1978. The park was renamed for Governor Tom McCall in 1984. So Tom McCall Waterfront Park was selected as a study area for this research because it contained a diversity of activities, amenities, and distinct areas that could be easily divided into 4 quadrants, using the bridges as landmarks. Portland has 8 bridges along our Willamette River. So it was really easy to think of the bridges as markers and divide up the waterfront. The park is iconic, and all participants were familiar with the park. Other parks in the Portland area were considered. However, they were not centrally located, and most did not contain a diversity of activities or amenities representing sounds that typically occur in cities or urban spaces. The park's size also allowed soundwalks to be conducted in a very large city park instead of a smaller park or having to utilize multiple parks for this study. What was really important to me too is the park provided ADA access for any participant that required accommodations. And overall, I made about 250 site visits and recorded over 100 hours of field recordings of Tom McCall Waterfront Park. So after my pilot studies, I recruited 31 professionals to participate in this study through purposeful sampling. The participants were recruited from a population of professionals in Portland responsible for either planning, designing, maintaining urban spaces, or regulating the sound that occurs in those spaces. This familiarity of urban spaces allowed them to focus on the sound walk experience versus other aspects of the parks. And I recruited the participants through my existing professional networks, phone calls, emails, in-person meetings, and recommendations. For my data analysis, the analysis of data, it was collected ongoing. Data were analyzed after each sound walk and sound preference survey was submitted. I would receive an email that the participant was done, doing their sound walk, and then I would analyze the data. Within a few hours of that, the data collected from the sound walk survey used the classification scheme to label potential categories and subcategories, and preliminary categories and subcategories were based on prominent themes that emerged and possible park activities that influenced the park's soundscape or impacted participants during the sound walk. The initial code categories changed over time based on the sound walk survey answers. After all the surveys were transcribed, conducted a thematic content analysis on each transcription to identify themes from each soundwalk and post-soundwalk survey, and also the patterns of themes among all the studies, soundwalk participants, codes, sub-themes, and theme names were created following the emergence of ideas from the data analysis. Based on the findings of this research, the findings are regarding the Soniferous experience of Tomahawk Waterfront Park were comprised of 5 themes and 15 sub-themes. Theme 1, the experience of the soundscape of Tomahawk Waterfront Park. This theme refers to the practitioner's point of view about the soundscape at the park and reveal how participants perceived the soundscape of the park when doing a sound walk. Theme 2, evaluation of Tomahawk Waterfront Park soundscape. This theme described the practitioner's interest to assess the park soundscape. Theme 3, daily activities and their impact on Tomahawk Waterfront Park's soundscape. This theme refers to practitioners' experiences of how their daily work and duties and activities could influence or impact the soundscape of the park. Theme 4, practitioner suggestions for balancing the soundscape of Tomahawk Waterfront Park. This theme refers to the practitioner's suggestions to harmonize the current soundscape or mitigate the negative sounds they identified during their sound walks. And the last theme, foreseeing the future at Tomahawk Waterfront Park. This theme refers to the practitioner's future vision of what they would do if they could improve the current soundscape of the park. This visual shows the association and organization of the 5 themes related to each research question. The themes that emerge from the data analysis represent the findings that answer all of my research questions. And when I look at the findings, in comparison to the literature, my findings confirm the following. The soundscape approach raises awareness. The findings confirm using the soundscape approach and using the sound walk also raised awareness among the practitioners regarding the role sound plays in urban spaces, such as public parks. Over 80% of the participants stated that after participating in this study, they were now more aware of the soundscape. Also, sounds contribute to the characterization of places. The findings indicate that human-made sounds from transportation, such as highways, bridges, and traffic, as well as natural sounds from the river, birds, other wildlife, and fountains are combined to characterize the expected soundscape of a public place, such as Tomahawk Waterfront Park. Sounds also inspire action. For example, sound encourage activities. An example of this would be hearing a busker playing music and stopping to watch or dance, or not hearing many sounds and becoming respectful of the quiet. Sound walks are a viable tool for in situ evaluation of the soundscape in urban spaces. The literature also confirmed a research gap regarding the use of the soundscape approach in the United States. So although the study results provided a snapshot of practitioners' lived experience as they explored and perceived the soundscape of the park, this study has limitations that should be considered for future research. This study focused on a specific sample of practitioners. The study results are from practitioners' perspective and not the general public, whose perspective should also be considered in future studies. The results of this research are limited by weather and the time of day, since the study was primarily conducted during daylight hours and good weather months. Here in Portland, we get overcast and rain anywhere from 6 to 7 months out of the year. So I did take advantage of the good weather months to conduct this study. So implications for practice. As practitioners, we should, balance the combination of visual and sonic elements to offer a broader sense of place, encourage multidisciplinary work that considers the soundscape during the planning and design phases, and consider all sounds in order to reach an acoustic balance when planning parks and urban spaces, and actively listening to increase the awareness of the soundscape. As far as recommendations for future research, I propose the following recommendations. Examine the efficacy of antiquated noise codes and regulations. Study how people perceive the soniferous experience of urban spaces at night and other hours of the day. Also investigate equity and racist impacts of a complaint-driven noise control and enforcement system, and follow up with the practitioners, to see if they really are implementing a soundscape approach in their practice, and really examine and explore the contrast of soundscape perceptions between practitioners and the general public. So in closing, I experienced this park as a husband, as an expecting dad, as a new dad, as a Black man in a white city, during protest, George Floyd protest, during a lot of social unrest. Also, at the beginning of the pandemic. As I reflect on this research journey, in the more than 200 sound walks, I've taken through this park, the one most obvious thing is that this park's sensory experience is rich and continually changing. My curiosity and passion for cities and what they sound like, it's kept me determined to work at the nexus of acoustic ecology, urban planning, and sensory urbanism. This study brought together acoustic ecology concepts of the soundscape, site planning concepts of urban planning and design, all in order to shed new light on the awareness, the preservation, and the enjoyment of the sensory experience of the city, urban spaces, and parks, rather than, looking at sound as something that should be controlled, policed, or eliminated, as far as taking that opportunity to create memories and also taking away the opportunity to create a sense of place. All right, that does it for me. I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I can take any questions if you have any.
All right.
Let's see.
Can you hear us all right in here now?
I can.
Okay,
I'm just
good. I know,
sure
windows upon windows.
Yeah, I have tons of windows here.
Yeah. And if any, we see on Zoom, there's a question. I'll go ahead and say it out loud.
Okay, thank you.
Have you worked with any practitioners in any other cities?
I have, and normally I am getting the questions about noise control. And what I'm normally doing in those situations is helping facilitate very contentious situations between the public and whether it's a noise code or it's two neighbors who may be at odds about different sounds that are happening, between their properties.
I've been asking this question. Oh, first, thank you so much for the very interesting presentation. And I was wondering, how do you get into this field? I guess I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about, your trajectory of going into this urban planning career? Yeah.
I had a pretty extensive career as an artist, filmmaker, and music producer, and I always was part of an environmental justice movement. I was helping diversify the environmental movement, getting more color of youth out in nature and hiking, and as many of us have probably decided to do a random career change, I went into urban planning, but I could not leave behind my passion for sound. And I tried to find a way, to not abandon my love for sound. And that's how I really started thinking about it. But as I mentioned earlier, I never I wasn't meeting anyone who was interested in sound, as far as urban planning. Everybody wanted to stick a water feature and thought it was cool. And that was about it. It was more for the visualization, not necessarily for, the acoustic properties. So I just really started to think more about sound and not noise. And, I just haven't looked back.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciated your talk about the sensorial experiences as a whole and how sound is so easily like omitted in that part, and architectural design is really inspiring. Thanks.
Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out.
In the Zoom chat, there's a suggestion or just I believe London developed a sound control law around psychoacoustic measures, and it might be useful for your work, from somebody in iPhone GP says that. But we do have a question from Zoom as well. Daniel, are you aware of ways by which there have been any shifts in the field of urban planning as it relates to soundscape awareness and not just noise mitigation?
I don't know who gets to take credit for it. I don't know if it's the pandemic. I don't know if what has happened, but I'm not even sure if urban planners or urban planning are aware of some of the shifts that happen with changing streetscapes, blocking off streetscapes to help business, so really it was more of an economic development tool to block off streetscapes in front of restaurants to prevent transportation of cars. But that definitely impacted the soundscape in a positive way, where people are able to sit outside and enjoy a meal, enjoy conversations without the hustle and bustle of transportation sound. That's one of the biggest things, that came out. And I think a lot of that did come through some recommendations or work through urban planning and transportation planning. There's always the talk, and I know many of you may be familiar with, planting more vegetation and things like that. I think some of that work has been doing in a more, it's happening in a more intentional way of not just the visual component, but actually starting to think about attracting more bird species and habitats for song, for bird songs and things of that nature, and strategically placing, different, parks, near more nature, as far as, water, lakes, rivers, things of that sort. So I think the intentionality is starting to shift. I still think, and one thing I have to say as a caveat, I'm speaking from a very United States centric perspective. So I'm starting to see the shift. I'm hoping that, myself and the many people that I continue to meet, that, we just really keep the drive going. I know there's others, in the acoustic ecology field. They've been doing this for, 40, 50 years. And it's time for, so many other folks, for us to step up and keep that push going.
Hi, thank you for your wonderful and sharing your wonderful work. My question is regarding publishing, or where can I find some of the data, or perhaps the questions for that you've done in your surveys?
Yeah, I could share that with you. My information is in the, what's it called? Inventee, I think it's called. So yeah, there's some information also published through, my former university. So yeah, just let me know anything I can share with you that goes, not just you only, but, the entire conference. Look forward to actually any collaborations and the sharing of data and information.